Hello and welcome to Get Informed, America, the show that breaks through the mainstream media box to bring you real smart news. Hi, I'm Dave Oakenquist, and joining me is the editor of InformedAmerican.com and contributor to WallStreetWireNews.com, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, how are you?
I'm well, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great. And then today, Rodney, this is we've got a very unexpected bit of news, Rodney, and Rodney is the smartest person I know. So at a time like this, or potentially the biggest story of the year, and something that's just sending this wild speculation and all over the place, is the news that President Trump and Melania Trump have both tested positive for coronavirus. Rodney, is this the October surprise? Oh man.
Well, it's definitely a surprise in October, so I guess it kind of counts, right?
Qualifies, yeah. Now, this came last night. I saw that Trump advisor Hope Hicks had tested positive, and I saw a tweet from the president saying that him and Melania were going to get tested. And I don't know when the announcement came that if it was later in the night, like
overnight sometime.
Overnight, yeah, I think it was like 1 a.m. or something like that. Now, there's a lot of layers in this, so let's just go in. The immediate effects that I see, well, first of all, it is COVID-19. The man is in his 70s, and there's a chance right now is that that apparently he only has mild symptoms. But before we get into any speculation, there is a right now there is a threat to the president's health, right, Rodney?
There is, but so he's over 70, 74 years old. He's overweight. He doesn't drink. He's been given a clean bill of health during, each of his exams over the past 3 years.
Yeah, healthiest president ever, right?
Well, I don't know about that, but I've heard that mainly from him. But the point is that while he is in the risk group, we have to remember those in the risk group do succumb to COVID-19 at a much higher rate than the average population, but it's still only 3-4%. And among those, they have comorbidities. And so other than him carrying some extra weight, he doesn't have those other comorbidities like congestive heart failure or diabetes or other things. And he has arguably the best healthcare available to him on the planet. It was caught wildly early because he's tested so often.
Yeah.
And so all the things you can do to make this a mild case for anyone happens with him. And so the most likely scenario is he has a little bit of a pain of, touch of the flu, and he gets over it. That is definitely the most likely. But you know what? There's always the outlier. And that, of course, is what everybody's going to be speculating about over the weekend. And it flows into politics, right? That, perhaps he gets quite ill and can't perform his duties, and he steps aside, and Mike Pence steps in, and then Mike Pence becomes the top of the ticket for November. And all of a sudden, the complexion of it changes, because while President Trump, of course, attracts his base, and a very loyal base who is with him to the end and believes in what he does, there's a group of people that he doesn't speak to, that like his policies, but really don't like him. And so having Pence at the top of the ticket would perhaps attract some swing voters that were not going to come to the president. And so there's so many things, right? But here's something that we don't talk about, or we haven't talked about. I understand all this is fresh.
Okay.
Kind of the worst is either he's in limbo where he's ill, but it's still there. And so you're not really sure what's going on or who's in charge. That sort of uncertainty is what people, voters, investors, whatever you want to call it, foreign powers, nobody likes uncertainty. That does not work well. And of course, there is the very, dire consequence of perhaps Melania succumbs to COVID-19, but the president doesn't. And then you have a president in mourning in the presidency, which, you just feel for the man. You feel for anybody in this. But both of them being ill brings some complexity to it that perhaps people don't focus on the first lady as much as being part of this whole situation.
Now, she's only 50 years old. I believe that's correct. And as far as we know, she's otherwise healthy. So hopefully, certainly we wish the president and the first lady a fast recovery.
Absolutely.
And now on the Pence thing, I mean, it definitely got morbid really quick, Rodney.
You have to go through the whole scenario, right? And so either very little, moderate, or this becomes very dire. And it's not as if people, remember, they're long haulers, people who recover from this, but it's after a long, difficult illness where they are incapacitated. And then they have these lingering issues that continue to this day. We don't know how long. They're long haulers. And so we have to look at each of those three: almost nothing, moderate, and then very severe.
Mhm. Now Trump is the most high-profile person in the world, clearly, to get COVID-19. But Boris Johnson also had it.
Yep.
And I'm assuming presidents have been sick before. Assuming this doesn't to the point where like the president is on a ventilator or something. I know people have been trying to do the 25th Amendment for since day one.
Yeah.
Now those cries are already going to get louder. But the Boris Johnson example, he quarantined. He was very sick. Apparently, he went through a rough time, but he's okay now. And in terms of Pence, I think you lose more voters than you gain with Pence. That's my opinion.
I don't know, but it's worth visiting the Boris Johnson thing for a moment. So in the United States, we elect people, and obviously everybody does. But in Britain, they really vote more for policy. They vote for a group. They vote for the Tories. They vote for Labour. While there's a person at the top of that, of course, it's really more about the policies than the person. And we don't do that as much here. We're more about the person. When Boris Johnson was ill, he was out of sight and out of commission for a number of weeks. It wasn't a day or two. And so if you can imagine President Trump becoming ill and then having to remain clearly in bed and kind of fight this for 3 weeks, what are those 3 weeks? Are they August 6th through, August 27? Imagine that with the election on November 3rd. I mean, you're creating an incredible vacuum leading right up to the point where there's a potential change in the voted top of the United States of America. So that's very interesting.
Well, so then let's speculate what this talk about the nitty gritty here, what this means for going forward in the month of October, Rodney. As you mentioned, I mean, we just had a debate earlier in this week, and now it would appear that the second debate seems to be completely off the table now, right? First of all.
I would think so. There's no reason to scrub it until you get a little bit closer to see how this happens, because many people get COVID-19, have very mild symptoms, and it just goes away. And he could be one of those. And so, as I said at the beginning, the most likely thing is he recovers because of all the things in his favor. One of the biggest being that it was caught so early because of who he is and how often they test. And so you can do things that will help that, kind of speed along. And so the biggest issue for me, and I think for a lot of people, is going to be the uncertainty as we go through the next couple of weeks to kind of figure it out. And so this is going to fill the airwaves, right? It's going to fill the airwaves for 2 weeks, as if we thought politics already filled the airwaves. There will be no breathing room for anything else. There will be no oxygen in the room for anything. The World Series won't exist. It'll be the topic.
Yeah, and I think we're all looking forward to anonymously sourced reports of Trump's condition over the next couple of weeks, right? Now the markets. The markets went down on this news, and in terms of the election, I want to move to how you think this affects the race. Betting markets took a divergence quickly as this news favoring Joe Biden. Now, President Trump, he can no longer campaign effectively, and potentially he may not be able to campaign until the election. So that he's basically grounded. Literally, in that sense.
Right, but remember what so many people have said for all of his presidency. If he just stopped talking, he would do better. Because many people are looking at his policies of lower regulation and more stringent, immigration controls. Not stopping immigration. I don't think that makes sense. And I'm not saying this is what I believe. I'm saying this is what people were asking for of him. Is to see more of what he's done. The First Steps policy, where he reduced the sentence of many people who were in jail and let them out. Certainly, the Supreme Court justice nominations and 2 confirmations, with the third here, apparently underway. And so those things speak to a lot of people who are very happy, but they do not agree with some of the things he says and tweets. And so if the policies stand without his personality wrapped around them for these weeks, then potentially people feel a little bit better about him.
Could he? Well, all right. So, does this gain him sympathy, or does it make him look weak?
Oh, sympathy. I don't think you can make President Trump look weak. I mean, if you believe he's a weak president because of the way he behaves in a certainly more aggressive fashion, if you take that as bully and you see that as a point of weakness and everything, none of this is going to change your mind. But if people believed him to be a very strong and forthright president, then him being ill isn't going to change that either. So
Okay, because my
I
first
think definitely
reaction.
the sympathy.
Sorry.
Now, how much he gets, I don't know. I'm not saying this is going to be a big thing, but I'm saying I think that's more of the general direction people would go if they had to choose.
So consensus is that this hurts Trump dramatically, but you're taking a sort of uh, a counter narrative there.
Right. And I tell you, I've read nothing, right? This just broke this morning. I saw the news go across the ticker. I haven't listened to anybody else talk about it. So I'm telling you my impressions
Yeah,
of how
that's
I
good.
think this might play.
Yeah,
And I do think that it's a positive for him, not a negative.
interesting. So we'll see how this shakes out. It's just the timing. It's just, if this happened in August or something, or July, but here we are. Now, do you think there's speculation that the president was reckless with holding rallies and stuff like that, and that's why he caught it or something? Do you put any credence to that, or is this just the fact that, hey, look, we all work in the White House and people are shuffling in and out and all that? That's sort of how I see it. I don't imagine that. Um, just holding a
I
gathering
don't
up.
know that it comes from rallies. I wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
I think I think you're going to get much more the opposite. If he recovers quite quickly and does get any bump from this, you're going to have people conspiratorially wondering if he did this on purpose.
Oh, I've already seen that. I mean, the wild speculation all over the place. Yeah, I didn't do well in the first debate or something, and then I got the COVID, and now I'm
Yep.
a hero. Do
And
you think
you know,
finally before we leave this topic, because this is just news, so I think you and I are both sort of just like thinking this through in real time.
right.
I had speculated months ago that the reason why that he had been safe was that he was potentially taking something, a low key that he wasn't announcing. Maybe, I don't know, some treatment or something like that. As you said, he's assuming the best treatment available to him in the world. So, what do you think, therapeutic wise, drug wise? Could he be maybe taking something cutting edge to help him beat this?
Well, cutting edge, he could be, but um, having read a lot about this and how it's working and what populations are not getting it as much, cutting edge is probably old school. Hydroxychloroquine, or the malaria drug, is widespread through Africa because they have malaria. And so there is speculation that them taking this drug has helped them kind of fend it off. Not that it stops it, not that they don't get it. It is a virus, for goodness sake, but that it kind of dampens it down. And so perhaps they get it, but it's not as severe. And so there's that. There's
Early
also,
stages, right? Sorry.
that's okay. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Particularly when you take it in the early stages
That's
of.
just it. When you
Yeah.
take it as a prophylactic, or you're taking it in the early stages, some of the same thing. And so there's that. But there also, and I'm going to get this name wrong, so please forgive me, but it's the steroid, and I think it's dexamethasone, but I could be mistaken in the medical name. But a steroid also helps you in the early stage, if you catch it early enough, to kind of work through it and make it a lesser thing. And so I would imagine that he is on the things like that, not because everyone believes they work,
Mm-hmm.
but because they've shown some propensity to be involved when people get a much less severe case. And this is key, they have such a long history of being safe drugs. Now, clearly, hydroxychloroquine has some issues with heart. You have to manage that and some other
Yeah.
things. It's not like it has no effect, but that and the steroid have a long history of people taking them without an adverse effect. And the old axiom of first do no harm is clearly key. And so when you say cutting edge, I doubt it, because cutting edge is still so new,
Mm-hmm.
you're not sure of the potential adverse effects. Whereas taking something that we've had around for 70 years and people take regularly with no problem, I think that's where he is.
Interesting. Well, get well, Mr. President
Yeah.
and Madam
First
First
lady.
Lady. We will be watching this development as it goes on. I mean, it's just completely wild what's going on, Rodney. The news is just, this is like watching a movie that won't end. All right, so let's pivot a bit to economics, Rodney. Besides the news about President Trump and the First Lady, we also got the jobs report. In fact, the last jobs report before the election, non-farm payrolls rose 661,000 in September. But Rodney, that's a big number, but it fell short of expectations of about 800,000. Some good news: the unemployment rate dipped to 7.9%, which was expected to clock in at about 8.2%. And as I mentioned, this is the last report before the election. If any news here that might sway voters, I wouldn't think so. But looking at a chart here, Rodney, of all the jobs we lost, it looks like we're roughly halfway back. The economy has clawed itself about halfway back in terms of jobs coming back to getting to the pre-COVID disaster level. What's your take on the news this morning?
Well, you look at it and you look through the numbers, right? The headline's good, but we still have millions of people who don't have a job. And as I've written elsewhere, Wall Street Wire and some other places, what we're missing are those job opportunities. And so some of the areas where people have lost a job, they're just not coming back. You have up to 25,000 retail locations expected to close this year. And so those jobs aren't coming back. The tourism industry is going to be different in the future. And so those jobs are not coming back in the same number. And so these last millions of jobs that we have, these people that remain unemployed, are going to be the hardest to fill, which of course stands to reason, but you have to recognize it and not expect it to be like the stock market or something else where it just kind of walks right back to even and everything's good.
Yeah.
We're going to be dealing with this for a long time.
I'm looking here a little bit under the hood in terms of industries, how they performed last month, Rodney. Employment in leisure and hospitality was up 318,000, retail trade, 142,000, healthcare and social assistance, about 108,000, professional and business services, 90,000. So we're sort of we're sort of where we were there. Leisure and hospitality, it's what you would expect. Retail trade, these are the things that were shut down and are reopening. But as you mentioned, and something you wrote on informedamerican.com about bankruptcies, you got a story here: U.S. on pace for most company bankruptcies in history. And there's a quote here by Kyle Sturgeon, managing partner at the Atlanta-based turnaround firm Murray LLC, said this is almost certainly the worst year in recent history for retail. So I guess what you're left with is, how far back can we get if the places that we assume we heard this from the beginning, that this isn't a light switch economy, and that's bearing itself out. If those stores can't reopen, this is not good news for getting these jobs back. And when will they come back, or what will it look like, Rodney?
They don't come back. And so what happens is you have to create jobs elsewhere, which is, it's the old thing in economics that you learn in college that proves to be very difficult or darn near unworkable in the real world, which is job retraining, right? Job retraining doesn't work. It's never proven to work because so many other things come into play. And the old thought is, of course, an automotive factory in the upper Midwest, and the factory, closes down, the jobs go elsewhere, and maybe they just stop making that car, whatever it is. And so those people receive retraining. But guess what? They still live in that town. And so unless you have people move to where the opportunities are, to the places where their new skills are valued, then it doesn't really matter. And so that's the problem, is you may create more jobs over the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever, and see employment grow. But it doesn't mean that person, the one who lost their job during this downturn, finds that job. And so you have a real possibility of some people who lost their jobs during this becoming part of the permanently unemployed class, which is very difficult. And so while we're looking through all of this, we have to understand we still have over 26 million people claiming some level of continuing benefits.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people who are out there saying, yes, I'm still unemployed. And so the difficulty is going to be finding work for people who are in these retail settings when the retail settings simply contracted. It's not like this store closed and that store over there opened. The number of stores is smaller. And so that's the issue. What do you do with those people?
Yeah, certainly. Two quick things here before we move on. This disaster is almost as bad as factory towns closing up. It really has could have that same long-term impact, couldn't it?
Well, it could, but so a key difference here, and a positive one we're noting, retail tends to follow larger industry, right? I don't know of a town that is built around the Lord and Taylor's department store. That's uncommon. What's common is you have a washing machine factory, you have a call center, you have, the Winnebago maker, whatever it is. You have something that makes a product that can be shipped far or provides services far. And then you have services built up around that. So you have the restaurants and the retail and the whatever that serve the people who work at that point of industry in that town. And so it's very unusual for a town to be built around just that retail. You have some areas that are known for shopping, right? Perhaps you have a suburb that has a huge outlet mall or something, and that could be in some pain. But what we do have as a positive is that most of these people that are unemployed for retail are going to live in an area that might have some other opportunities for them. It's just not going to be retail. And so it will take a cross industry move to get them back into the workforce in a level that's going to work for them. But we have a better opportunity than perhaps watching those factory towns close down in what was the 70s and 80s, and even back in the mid to late 2000s.
Interesting. Rodney, final thing on this. I don't want to make it a separate topic, but just quickly, there's been some rumblings of maybe Congress getting closer to a deal for some relief for these unemployed people. You think we're actually moving towards that, or is this just more nonsense?
No, we're moving toward it. I was a little surprised. Not Congress, but the House passed a $2.4 trillion deal, which the Republicans say they're not going to pass in the Senate, and the White House doesn't agree with. But the White House moved from 1.5 to 1.6. And so, we're $800 billion apart, which, by the way, interestingly, is the exact size of the Recovery Act from 2009. And so it's interesting that these numbers are so big now, but it does show that both sides are still working on it ahead of the election. I'm very surprised by that. I thought they would have staked out their ground and just said, look, let the voters decide which one they think is smarter, the smaller one that's just for workers or the bigger one that also but gives aid to cities and states and stuff. But it looks to me like they're still trying.
Certainly. And sorry, I'm having a mic issue here.
That's all right.
Sort of fell. Okay, great. So, Ronnie, let's shift gears just a little bit. During the pandemic, as certainly as businesses have closed, but consumers have also changed their buying habits. We've seen companies like Peloton do well as they're sort of stuck at home. I can't go to the gym, so maybe I buy a Peloton. Also changing our eating habits a little bit as we're shifting towards, much to my chagrin, meatless burgers. We got a story here from WallStreetWire.com. Beyond Meat, capitalizing on pandemic health craze, Inc.'s massive distribution deal. And this distribution deal is with Walmart. So you can expect to see more. Walmart already sells the Impossible Burger, and now they will be selling the Beyond Meat burger. So, Ronnie, what do you make of this trend and this development?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with the pandemic. I mean, this was happening long before. And the old idea of wanting plant-based food to replace or substitute for protein-based food, right? Substituting plant-based meat for cows. Yeah. I understand the logic of it. Part of it is people who have an ethical issue with eating meat. I mean, I see what they're saying. I happen to enjoy a burger or steak. And people who say, look, this isn't sustainable because so much of our resources in terms of water, food, and other things go into raising animals for food like cows. And then their emissions. I mean, we have to remember cows are a significant source of emissions on the planet. And so they're saying as nations around the world move into middle class and beyond, they eat more protein, which is going to exponentially increase the desire for such things, demand. And so if we can come up with a plant-based substitute, we're doing the world a favor, as well as meeting some people's ethical concerns or whatever. Are they closer? I don't know. I mean, I hear that you went out and had an Impossible Burger just to kind of see how this worked. I mean, you had that burger yesterday. I haven't had one. What do you think?
That's right. Yesterday I went out, I got a Burger King nearby. I said, heck, we got this story here. Okay, so my first impression is I'm biased, which is I want my hunk of beef. I'm not interested in some bean soy thing. Okay, that's my initial bias going in.
Now, I did notice that when you said that, Dave, being a young man from Connecticut, you did take on a Southern accent to talk about that hunk of beef, which is a whole different social thing. But you go right ahead.
Okay, let's just move along. I was just trying to be emphatic, Rodney. So I got my Impossible Whopper. So So I went in not wanting to like it, so I'll admit that. But I did have it, and it was actually not that bad. There's just a couple things about it. I would say it's better than any turkey burger, any chicken burger, anything like that I've ever had. And it's probably because in this burger it has basically the same amount of fat content, or roughly the same as a piece of beef. It's high in salt, and there was so I think it's not. So I think the term healthy is maybe I think maybe a little bit misleading, because it's full of salt, full of fat, and it's highly processed. It's a piece of ground beef. There's nothing to it, right? This thing, it's maybe the most processed thing I eat, or at least that I've had in a number of days. So, and it didn't sit all that well. It also had an aftertaste and a smell that lingered for about 30 minutes in the room I was in. So, okay, I would give it maybe a 6 out of 10 in terms of taste. Certainly better than other things, but I'm far from sold on this, Rodney.
So you're not going to order one the next time you go to Burger King?
Certainly not.
Okay, that's the metric, right? Does it serve to you as a true substitute where you go, I could have this or have that, and I'm okay? And the answer
Not a chance.
Yeah. Right.
You know what it is, Rodney? It's a substitute in a dystopian world. That's what it is, and that's my fear. Because I just want to know. No, okay. So if you're trying to avoid red meat, I would say for everyone, if you are in Walmart and you see it, give it a try. It's worth a shot, particularly if you're trying to get off red meat or something like that. But I would caution that I would question rather if this thing is any healthier. It just seems completely artificial to me.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, we're moving. This seems to be a trend, and people are moving towards this. And I don't know, is it really? Do you think there's really this much demand out there for this sort of thing?
Well, I mean, how much demand does there have to be? I mean, there are 240 million adults in the United States of America. If 3% of them think this is a good idea, you're looking at 7.5 million people. That's not a bad market to serve.
Yeah.
And so clearly, if you're doing something like this, you want more than that. But still, call it 10%. That's 24 million people. And so it doesn't have to be a large percentage of people to take it on as a good idea. What you need is for them to consistently use it as a good idea. And so we've seen plant burgers before, the old garden burger and different things. I don't know if you tried those. It was like the General Motors EV1 for people who remember the General Motors electric vehicle back in the 80s. It was a horrible idea. And so these other things, and part of the issue is they call them a burger, right? Don't call it that. I mean, it's like soy milk. It is not milk. Almond milk. It's not milk. And so if you understand it not to be meant as a true substitute in taste and feel and everything, then you're better. But these are getting closer. And this plant-based burger is one thing. The cultured meat burger is another, where they literally grow meat in a lab in a petri dish essentially, and it is meat. And so I think what we're moving toward is some way that is a more sustainable way of developing or rather providing that taste and feel that people want.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I will, if I can get my hands on one of those lab grown slab of meat, then I'll give that one a taste test as well. But certainly for these companies, they're doing well. Of course,
Yep.
Beyond Meat is looking to definitely could be a buying opportunity there. And as this, hey, whether you like it or not, this could be a trend to take advantage of, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Great.
Certainly for investors.
Say again?
Certainly for investors.
Yeah, absolutely. Rodney, commercial space travel has long been viewed as a futuristic pipe dream to most outside the industry. Even with the amazing advancements in technology over the last few decades, living like the Jetsons is likely something many people view as still being centuries away. But you could get a taste of that, Rodney. You got another story here from WallStreetWireNews.com. Pack your spacesuit. Virgin Galactic surges on potential of space tourism. The stock. Wall Street analysts tabbed Virgin Galactic stock with a buy rating, touting its growth potential of space tourism, and shares of the company shot up 25%. Rodney, are you booking your ticket to have a little little space tourism?
I am not. I mean, we have a longtime friend of the company, Ken Baxter, so shout out to him, who was one of the first people to plunk down money to go into space with Virgin Galactic. And I understand the cost of a ticket. I think I've seen it recently is $250,000.
Oh my God.
And so there aren't a lot of people who are going to be putting down $250,000 to take a flight. Now, I say a lot, right? I mean, there's not going to be millions and millions. There are certainly probably hundreds of thousands, if not a million, that would do this. But what it means is this doesn't become an industry per se. It becomes a very niche thing for a small group or a company or two. It's still a long way. And what does it serve? You're in space for a number of minutes. It's not like days to experience that weightlessness there. And I would imagine it's really cool. I'm much more interested in the private space industry like SpaceX, which is introducing the low orbit satellite system to allow a satellite uplink of internet from anywhere on the planet in a matter of minutes. And they're currently using this. They do have hundreds of these satellites already in space in low orbit, and they are centered over the Pacific Northwest. And they're allowing first responders and firefighters to create an internet uplink in these areas devastated by the wildfires where all the infrastructure is gone. And so they said in less than an hour, they were able to create a hotspot for Wi-Fi telephone calls, straight up internet access, not only for themselves, but for the people that remain there. And so that to me is really bringing something to the table connected to the private space industry.
What does this mean where's the potential here for in the consumer sector for that?
Well, the consumer sector is you're now able to reach people in places that you could not before. And so you immediately think of poorer areas around the world that, mountainous regions where you weren't going to put any sort of infrastructure for internet because it's just too expensive. But I go all the way back. I mean, we have some friends in upstate Vermont where, frankly, it's just hard to get internet access. It's hard to get reliable internet access. And so what you would be doing if you kind of, bring this forward and say, well, we do it everywhere and it's simple and consistent, is you're allowing people to be connected from literally anywhere that they can see the sky. And so it makes telecommuting suddenly viable from any point. Whereas right now we say, oh, you can telecommute from anywhere, but we have all been to places with spotty internet service, terrible upload, download speed, all those other things, and this would do away with it. And I go back to, you get into emergency areas, you get into, wars, just all sorts of things, natural disasters, and you can immediately replace internet access. That is priceless in the moment.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And quickly back to the Virgin Galactic, the final sentence in this story: a fatal accident, though unlikely, could compromise the business model. You think you send a couple of billionaires up there with a $250,000 plane ticket or flight, and then I don't know how unlikely it is. It seems highly dangerous to send something up there. So then maybe that's not the future, Rodney. But it's a very exciting. It's a very exciting space.
Right.
For where these companies are going, and who knows really what could be next as more companies start getting access to space, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so very interesting there. Well, that's all we have for this week. Rodney, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank all of you for watching. If you're watching here on Facebook, please hit the like button, share this with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, we love it if you subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. And Rodney, of course, you're the editor of InformedAmerican.com, so if people head on over there, what kind of stories can they expect to see over the next coming days?
Well, there's no doubt everything's going to be taken up by the president and his health condition. It was going to be the election, but not anymore. It's going to be all about this.
Trump's got COVID, guys. The world just changed again. Well, so Rodney will be keeping you all up to date on that. Of course, over on our Facebook page, we'll always check out videos, stories, all that. And head on over to WallStreetWireNews.com, where you can get today's market in minutes. Well, for Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Okenquist telling you to get informed, America.
You've been listening to Get Informed, America, brought to you by the Informed American Radio Network. Please like and subscribe today in order to get new exclusive weekly episodes. Any questions, thoughts, or comments can be sent directly to info@informedamerican.com. And don't forget to visit informedamerican.com to keep up with real, smart news. Until next time, fight fake news and find common ground.